Hi, I'm Layla, and I'm 19 years old. I'm going to tell you about how I experienced more events in 3 weeks than in my whole life put together. I was on the verge of death. The closest person to me vilely betrayed me. I completely trusted myself to a stranger. I chose between nobility and vengeance, and I was faced with a huge disappointment. And on top of that, it all happened 10,000 miles from my home in Boston. 2 years before that, I met Donald. We did not live together. We'd just meet up and spend the night together from time to time. Donald was okay, and I was pretty happy. We were a good couple and had a variety of hobbies, but nothing really extraordinary. The most exciting thing would be going hiking or horseback riding on the outskirts of Boston. So you can imagine how shocked I was when Donald came to me and informed me that he had just robbed a store and that now he and I had to run away, and not somewhere nearby, but to Southeast Asia, and that he already had an idea of where exactly we would go, running away from the police, just like Bonnie and Clyde. However, it soon became clear that the story of the robbery was a slight exaggeration. Donald simply scooped up the daily cash at the grocery store where he worked part-time. I have to admit, it was the right thing to do since the owner often underpaid his employees and forced them to work extra hours. But this did not alter plans for our trip to Asia, and I had no choice but to invest part of my savings in this undertaking. Donald was determined, and nothing could stop him. We arrived at a place that was pretty remote from civilization, a wild beach with primitive bungalows and a cluster of nightclubs nearby. I was surprised, but Donald seemed to study all the information about the place we were going to very carefully. He knew the prices, where to bargain, where not to. He knew where to rent a scooter and how to get to the place. And we easily got there. It turned out to be more difficult to find the person who was renting the bungalows out, but Donald also managed to find him. And that very evening, we went to a party. Frankly, I was completely stunned by the chaos that was happening there. But Donald, he enjoyed it. This was the first time I had seen him this happy. And for several days, it was like this. We slept during the day, and from dusk until dawn, we hung out, moving from one party to another. I was bored. I lost track of time. But on about the 5th night, right in the middle of the dance floor, I suddenly felt very ill. I felt a strong fever. My whole body ached, and I had terrible chills. I tried to tell Donald about it, but he couldn't hear my whisper over the roar of the music, or he didn't try too hard, and I lost consciousness. When I came to, it was already light. I was in the bungalow, alone. I came to my senses and then fell into oblivion again and again. Finally, Donald came. It was hard for me to concentrate, but I realized that he thought that last night I drank too much alcohol. He carried me to a bungalow and then returned to the party. Now he made fun of me, saying that I didn't know how to drink, and it was only when I told him that it seemed like I was dying that he realized that something serious was happening. However, he still believed that I just had a severe hangover. Somehow he brought me out to the scooter and we went to a clinic. The clinic turned out to be a small building, crowded with a lot of people, some lying right at the door on the ground. Then Donald left me under a tree and went to look for a doctor. I agreed. I didn't want to go to the clinic either. Who knows? There might be people in there with more severe and contagious diseases. Soon, a few dollars did their work. A doctor came up to see me, examined me, and said that I had dengue fever, which was spread by mosquitoes. The only two things Donald was interested in was whether it was contagious and how long it would last. Upon learning that it was not contagious and would last at least a week with varying success, Donald drove me home to our bungalow, and then he went somewhere else. It was evening already when Donald returned. He had not slept from yesterday, was angry and upset. He had brought back several big plastic bottles of drinking water and a pack of soluble vitamins. He gave me some water and went to bed. I fell asleep too. When I woke up, I had this sense of deja vu. It was light, and I was alone. I tried to pour water into a glass, but I was so weak that I dropped the bottle, and I burst into tears from helplessness and despair. And someone heard my silent cry. Some guy looked into the bungalow. He was long-haired and very tan. He asked what was wrong with me, and when he heard dengue, he resolutely came inside. He silently made water with soluble vitamins for me, put a wet compress on my forehead, and then wiped my hands and feet with a wet towel. What a relief it was. I had the strength to have a small chat with him. His name was Bob. He was an American, but had lived here for many months. He was 23 years old and dropped out of college for the sake of finding some writing inspiration here. He was quietly telling me something else, but I fell asleep. I was awakened by loud voices and banging sounds. Donald, who was clearly drunk, shouted that Bob was my lover and tried to attack Bob with a warlike swing of a bamboo stool. But Bob was stronger, so he twisted Donald and threw him out, throwing his bag after him. I heard the sound of a scooter driving off, and I began to cry. Bob tried to reassure me and joke that now I was completely under his reign. But this only scared me, and I cried harder. Bob apologized for the stupid joke, and this was the first and last misunderstanding between us while we were together. He stayed and took care of me. Sometimes he went away somewhere and came back with some chicken soup. He slept on the bungalow floor at night. On the 4th day since I had gotten sick, I felt better, but I was weak and covered in an itchy rash. However, Bob helped me out of the bungalow to get some fresh air. When I stood in the sand, leaning on his strong, tanned arm, I realized that if it were not for my terrible physical condition, I would know how to express my gratitude for him. But that very night, the fever returned, and it started all over again and lasted another 3 days. And then I woke up very weak, but completely healthy. After Bob realized I was better, he said that he needed to leave to go run some of his errands. When I was left alone, I realized that I didn't have a clear idea of what to do next. Nothing held me in this place. I was not going to hang around and go to all these parties. In my wallet, I only found my return ticket. Donald had apparently taken his one with him. The flight left in 1 week. I picked up my smartphone, but of course it was dead. I connected it to the power bank and suddenly made a decision. I will spend the rest of my time here with Bob, and Donald can go to hell. Somehow, I got myself in order and even dressed up nicely. And when Bob returned, I told him about my plans. Bob smiled so happily. He told me we should probably leave immediately. And then my smartphone rang. It was Donald's mother, and she was in a complete panic. She hadn't been able to get in touch with Donald or me for the 2nd day in a row. I tried to explain the situation to her, but she only realized that I did not know where her son was, and she started yelling at me. I was shocked to hear her curse at me. But suddenly, Bob, who was close enough to hear the whole conversation, took the phone from me. In a very harsh manner, he told Donald's mother that her bastard son had left his girlfriend to die and then breezed off to a party, and that now she could look for him herself. After that, he hung up on her. I don't know if I was grateful or discouraged by that intervention, but I was more worried about something else. Whatever Donald had done, he was my boyfriend, and I had to find him. Bob looked disappointed, but agreed to take me on his scooter to the local police station. I must say, the search for Donald did not last very long. When cops realized that we were talking about a missing American citizen, they did their best. And it turned out that Donald was at the clinic, in that very local clinic that I didn't end up in. When we arrived there, we found Donald in a terrible state. He had dengue fever. Moreover, he had neither money nor documents because he had been robbed and beaten. He spent the night on the street somewhere in a slum. I was shocked, but Bob had no mercy for him. "You got what you deserved," he said to Donald, and gently led me outside. But when he realized that I was going to contact the embassy and the airline to help Donald get home, he became very gloomy. I asked him what was wrong, and he very bitterly said, It's amazing how much you girls love scumbags. I got rid of this moron for you, but you found him, and now you're going to babysit him. And then I suddenly realized that it was Bob who had hired people to explain to Donald that he should never bother me. Oh God, I could barely believe that someone would do something like that for me, but it was too much. Well, I said my last goodbye to Bob right there. And I have to say that even though his ideas about knightliness turned out to be, well, somewhat wrong, he really left me alone, just like I asked him to. Well, I managed to sort things out for Donald, and Donald managed to recover by the day of our flight home. When I picked him up from the hospital, I told him that everything was over between us. We didn't talk to each other all the way back. And when we returned to Boston, we never saw each other again. And Bob, if you can hear me, you should know that sometimes I miss you really bad, but you overdid it.